Are you an ESL teacher? Do you teach ESL abroad? Would you like to? Well, this is something I've been doing for the last 30 something years. I'm an American, native English speaker, and I've been teaching ESL basically. Like I said, for the last 30 years. I became an ESL teacher in 1996. And it's it's been 30 something years, and I'm still doing it, so it's worked out for me. So it is a job. It is something that you could make a living with for a long period of time, obviously. The thing is, today I was in class, not my class. I've signed up for a video storytelling class, I guess you'd call it. And I was in that class as a student. And at one point, the instructor asked everybody what they did for a living. And I mentioned that I was a teacher. And he said, a teacher. So what do you teach? And I said, ESL. And I could see the disapproval on his face, and I could hear it in his voice. It was something like, I'm exaggerating, but it was something like, English, okay. And then he moved on, and that was it. And I let it go. I mean, that's something that I've dealt with for years. I just get that attitude all the time. Oh, you're not a real teacher. I'd meet people on holiday, and if they were teachers, I would, we talk about what we do for a living back at home. I'd say, well, I'm at home right now. I'm a teacher. I'm an ESL teacher. And occasionally somebody would respond with, oh, well, I'm a real teacher back in Chicago or whatever. And I mean, the first few times I encountered that attitude, it was very, very annoying, and it's clearly offensive. I mean, it's offensive even now. I don't get offended by it because I understand where it comes from, but at first I found it very offensive. Where does that come from? All right, well, let's talk about how you become an ESL teacher. All right, well, first you do a course in teaching English as a second or a foreign language. The most famous one is called a CELTA, but there are several other ones that are very respectable. If you study full-time to get the certificate, you study full-time, it should be 120 to 150 hours, something like that, course, and takes about a month, and if you pass, you receive your certificate. If you don't pass, you don't get a refund. It's not one of those pay for a diploma course. I mean, it's a real course. It's not an easy one either. I was sure I was going to fail right up until the time they gave me a certificate. And well, I passed with flying colors too, but it was tough. So there's that. So then you're qualified to get a job teaching, but qualified how? I mean, if you're planning to teach in another country, you have to follow the rules of that country. And many countries these days require a bachelor's degree in addition to the teaching certificate. So that's to begin with. So you have a bachelor's degree, and then you pay extra to get this teaching certificate, which is also not an easy course, as I've said. And then you qualify to get a work permit. Now, you qualify with just a certificate to get the job, but you got to qualify with a work permit. So, I mean, can you work without a work permit? Yeah, sometimes in some places. I wouldn't do it. It's dodgy. It's risky, so there's that as well. But in any case, the problem is that there are a lot of ESL courses that are the type of places where if you pay the money, they just give you the diploma. And they have coursework. It's online. They do things, and you can, you can flub things. And I mean, if you're completely hopeless, they'll still give you the diploma because you paid for the certificate. Some of them are like a week long. Some of them aren't even that, a couple of days, and you get your certificate or something like that. So that's where some of the comments come from, is that it's known that that exists. And can you get a job with a certificate like that? In some places, maybe. I don't know. I've never tried. I have a CELTA. I have a legitimate certificate to teach, and so I don't know, but I do know that it exists. And I also know that a lot of people who are attracted to this kind of job, well, I mean, there's all kinds. There's as many different types of ESL teachers as there are people on the planet. You've got rich kids who get a certificate and go teach abroad for a year, maybe two, and then they go home and do a real job. There's that. And then you've got pedophiles and just people who want to get away from their country because of legal issues or whatever. So you've got that, and they get an ESL job because they need some kind of income. So, these people exist, and I'm aware of that. In fact, I don't know about the statistics, there may be more of those than there are legitimate ESL teachers. That's possible. And once I became aware of this, I became a lot more forgiving of those kinds of comments and attitudes. I still don't forget my instructor. I still don't forgive my instructor for that attitude. He should have been more professional than that. As the instructor of a class that I paid money to join, but that's neither here nor there. It did trigger this video, though. So, the issue with being a real teacher, though, that killed me. Because I have been a real teacher. I worked for a year at a middle school in Indonesia once. And that job was bullshit. It was, I mean, you marking exams and making lesson plans and managing students and classroom stuff and the whole bit, marking essays and papers and all this, and marking grades and the whole bit. And it paid less than an ESL job would pay. And here's the thing that really got me. The other teachers at that school, they had graduated from normal universities. They had graduated with teaching degrees. And they were shittier teachers than I was. Well, I wasn't a shitty teacher. I was actually quite a good teacher. In fact, I actually took over the music program halfway through the year, in addition to my English teaching duties. And I also covered for the history teacher several times, and I was the advisor for the Chinese club with a bachelor's degree in music and an ESL teaching certificate. And the teachers I was working with, they were coming to me for advice on how to do really basic things. And I would sit into other teachers' classes, and they would just be blah, blah, blahing at their students without any sort of interaction between the students and the teacher. It was terrible. It was terrible. My background and my experience made me a better teacher compared to the other teachers at this middle school than they were. So I'm not a real teacher. All right, fuck you. The thing is, I ended up leaving that school because it was far more work than I needed to do. I went back into teaching ESL because the pay was better and the work was less. I mean, I got into teaching ESL because I was living abroad. I was working as a musician and not making much money, working my ass off, barely able to pay rent, and this lasted for years. I left the United States in 1991 to join a band that I was, offered the gig for, and that fell apart. And I worked as a musician in New Zealand and in Mexico, and then my sister sent me an advertisement she got out of the Utiny Reader for becoming an ESL teacher. I read it, I thought it was awesome, and so I took the course and then started becoming a teacher. Now, the teaching pay is not very great. You're not going to retire, you're not going to buy a yacht, you're not going to, raise a family and build a house on the money you make as an ESL teacher, at least not in my experience. But it was a much more secure and better paying job than I had as a musician, so I thought it was fantastic. So, that's just me. So if you want to be an ESL teacher, what are your reasons? What do you want to do with yourself? Why do you want to be a teacher? And so on. I mean, it's not a job for everyone. It's not an easy job. No one ever tries to sell it as an easy job, as far as I know. But you need to be aware of that. And you also need to be aware of the prejudice that people have against ESL teachers, because there are so many really crap, not really teachers out there. You sign up for online courses with an ESL teacher and they don't really know the grammar, they don't really know much about the vocabulary, they don't even speak very well. So there's a lot of that. There always has been. And so again, I understand where the attitude comes from. If you're still interested in becoming an ESL teacher, I like my life. I like my job. It's the first job I ever had that I did not dread going to work. Well, I never dreaded going to work as a musician either, but I mean a salaried or steady pay position. It's the first that kind of job. The first day gig I ever had that I did not dread going to work. So, I endorse it. I like my job. I like my life. I'm not disparaging it. I'm not trying to discourage anyone from doing it. But there is this attitude out there, and now you know why it exists. It's disappointing that people make these assumptions, but they do. I think we all do to some extent. But at any rate, that's what I have to say about that. So I'm going to go now, and I thank you for watching.